2.5 months by the government giving you the extra money. And then the rest of the year, you'd have $488 to spend over and above what you normally would have. So hopefully that this can go through, because I think we have to stop looking at and me and look at the whole and think what's best for the whole county, because any improvement in the county makes it better for the people, everybody in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up on my list to speak is Carrie Miller.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I have no other forms in front of me. Is there anybody in the public that still would like to speak? I'm going to ask again, is there anybody in the public that would still like to speak about anything on their mind? Hearing none, what I'd like to do then is to move into my next agenda item on my list. It's approval of the minutes from August 7th, 2024. I need a motion.
To approve. Second.
I have a first and I have a second. Any discussion in regards to the minutes of August 7th, 2024? Hearing none. Youth and Governance, all in favor? Committee, all in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none. The minutes of August 7th, 2024 are approved. Thank you. Next up, I have the ordinance by the Racine County Finance and Human Resource Committee and Executive Committee creating Chapter 7, Article 9, County Sales Tax and Use Tax and Property Relief Tax of the Racine County Ordinances 2024. This is for discussion only, and I'd like to bring into the discussion right now our legal counsel, Michael Lansdorf. Michael, are you with us? We're working on it. We need to hear you. You're muted, Michael. Let's try it again.
Michael, are you unmuted on your end? Because it shows on ours that you're muted.
That's right. Says we sent the request to unmute.
I'm going to let them work on this, and I'd like to move on to the next agenda item. And then when we connect with Michael, we will then, upon completion of the next item, pop them in. So next up on my agenda is the Finance Department. Gwen Zimmer with PFM Financial Advisors, Racine County's sale of Series 2024A and 2024B bond results. Welcome, PFM. Kristen and Matt, good to see you again and looking through the information. I like it, but forward.
For the record, my name is Kristen Hansen. I'm a Director of Financial Advisor at PFM out of our Milwaukee office, and I believe you should have the handout. Excellent.
Yep.
So starting on page 2, back in October,
Could you identify Matt too for the last name, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Matt Schnackenberg, Managing Director in PFM's Minneapolis office.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
thank you, sorry.
That's all right. Okay.
So back in October, Halloween, I believe, you adopted 2 parameters resolutions for the sale of the borrowings for your capital improvement projects that you approved through your budget process. And so the 2024 A parameters resolution was for 10,930,000 of GO corporate purpose bonds. And it authorizes the county executive, corporate counselor, the finance director to accept bids on a date that we determine is beneficial for the county and when you need the money. So at that time, we put a not to exceed principal amount, and we defined what the payment schedule would be. We put a not to exceed interest cost rate of 6%. We determined when interest and principal payments were due. And in the case of these bonds, because they're 15-year bonds, the bonds are callable. So there was a redemption feature saying that bonds that mature on March 1st of 2035 are subject to redemption on March 1st, 2034. So if down the road, if the market is favorable, you can refinance for savings. And then the other requirement is that we do this presentation so you know the sale results. Just so you know, you did start this parameters process back in 2021. So this is something that you've been tying it to your budget process and gives you flexibility in borrowing on the timing and kind of where the market is. Page 3 just talks about the parameters for the 2024B, the taxable geo-promissory notes, with the same kind of authorizing the county exec, corporate counsel, or finance director accept bids when we do the financing. The par amount was not to exceed $550,000. There was a kind of an estimated payments structure. In this case, because they're taxable, we had a higher interest rate of 7%. It indicated when interest payments were due, and because these were shorter, there was no call date. So there's not that ability. So on July 23rd, page 4, we did take bids for both the 2024A and 2024B. We received 4 bids on the tax exempt bonds, and you received a true interest cost rate of 3.62. And you can see that the cover bid or second place bid was 3.64, so there was very tight bidding. Loop Capital Markets did provide the lowest cost to the district. As a result of the bid, the county will receive $112,000 in additional proceeds for your projects. And we did slightly restructure the debt just to fit into kind of the financing plan, and the bonds were awarded to Loop Capital Markets. Page 5 shows the results of the taxable notes. You received 3 bids on those. BOK Financial Securities out of Dallas, Texas, with a true interest cost rate of 5.01 was the lowest bidder, with Northland Securities and Bernardi Securities bidding as well. Based on the type of bid received, you will receive $12,000 more in project costs for those projects. The 2024 bonds were awarded to BOK, and Gwen was there to accept the bid and sign the appropriate documentation. Page 6 shows what the financing schedule, the proposed financing schedule were for the two issues. So you can see the par amount, and then what's important is the total interest. And we do have a cost comparison. And then, as you've seen before, slide 7 shows what this will do to your existing debt service. So the yellow bars, it's printed in black and white. So I apologize for that. But this shows where your levy supported debt will be with the 2024 issuances. Slide 8 shows what will be happening to the mill rate. It looks very similar. So this was the estimate prior to the bond sale. Slide 9 shows the actual debt service schedule. So we did not change the par amount of either the bonds or the notes. We kept it at the 10,930,000 and the 550. But the total debt service for the 2024 A's was 2.1 million less than projected based on the lower interest rate, which is a savings to the taxpayers. And for the 2024 B taxable notes, the debt service is 22,618 less. So that was good news when we took bids. Slide 10 shows what the actual debt service will be with the issuance of the 2024 A's and B's. And slide 11 shows what that mill rate is going to be. The last slide, the second to the last slide shows the pre-sale versus the actual sale results. So you can see the pre-sale estimates show the total principal and interest of the 2024 A bonds and the 2024 B notes totaling 17,011,000. With the actual bids that came in, the total principal and interest for the two issues is 14,887,000. So by coming to market when we did and the lower interest rates on both issues, that's a savings of just over 2.1 million. In case you were wondering, since we do this every year, page 13 shows a 10-year history of what's been happening with the market with tax exempt and taxable rates. So back in 2021, you can see that rates were lower and have been creeping up and have been rather volatile over the past few years. So that just gives you an illustration of what has happened in the market in the last 10 years. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't have a crystal ball. And then page 14 shows kind of the key steps that happens starting in October when this process was started. Any questions?
Questions from the committee? Supervisor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In July, the county approved parameters for a number of projects. When will it be appropriate to add those to your charts showing the commitment of the county to the debt?
Chairman, member of the committee. Back in July, the resolutions that were adopted are called initial resolutions, which you approved going forward for the maximum amount for all the projects. We are in process, Gwen and I are in process of determining what the borrowing amounts will be for the projects that you're going to borrow for in 2024 yet. And so there will be either the parameters resolution, as you noticed when I walked through all those steps, will determine what the not to exceed par amount will be, what the not to exceed interest rate will be, what the actual estimated debt service schedule will be. And so you will be seeing, either a parameters resolution for that borrowing, or we will actually come to the board with actual sale results.
Thank you.
Supervisor Ekman. Excuse me.
If I'm reading it right, the notes are 3 years?
Oh, correct. I meant to mention that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yes, typically the GO bonds have been 15 years and the taxable, I think in 2021, we might have issued the taxable as bonds, but since then, because the interest rates are higher on taxable bonds, we make them shorter. so that you're paying less in interest than if they were spread out over a longer period of time. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Yeah, I do. I happened to pull out a sales results from PFM in February of 22nd of 2023, and the rates were higher. So they have come down a little bit. Back then, it was at, just point of reference, 4.465 was the winning bid on $8.2 million. And on 10 point, what do we call it? 10.9? It's 3.62. So they have come down, which is great. Thank you very much. I'm really excited about that. Less interest we have to pay as a county over a period of time. So they have come down, and hopefully if we continue to borrow as we go forward, we keep our fingers crossed that we continue to get better and better rates I don't think they'll get as low as we got when they were at 2% and 3%, but who knows, right? Comments, questions from the committee? Well, thank you very much, Kristen and Matt. I believe we'll proceed forward with the next agenda item, and thank you for attending this evening.
Thank you.
Do we have Attorney Lansdorf now? Michael?
Can you hear me, Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for your patience, and thank you to the audience for your patience and the committee. Michael, I'll let you take it away, please.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening. And thank you all for your patience and as we work through those technical issues. So over recent weeks, there have been a number of lengthy and fact-filled presentations. You've heard extensively from County Executive House. You've been reminded of former County Executive Delagrave's words, his vision, and of his recent budgets that were framed explicitly as bridge budgets that relied heavily on use of reserves and other one-time revenue sources. He would describe those recent budgets as a bridge, and that the check engine light was on and could no longer be ignored, in the sense that a time would come where alternative revenue sources would be needed to access if we were to continue on our path of providing quality services, while of course never betraying the conservative fiscal practices and tax-centered approach that has come to define Racine County. You've also heard extensively from staff, including myself, largely department heads. Some of you may even be of the opinion that you've heard too much from staff. You may be surprised that you wouldn't find much disagreement from staff on that point. It is not, nor should it be, our role to make policy decisions. That role is entrusted to the Board of Supervisors, along with the executive leadership of the county executive. However, it is our job to ensure that you are informed when making those critical decisions. Department heads and staff are responsible today operations. These jobs require attention to detail, specialized training, specialized education, experience, and yes, the ability to make recommendations and give professional advice. So when you've heard, for example, that a significant number of deputy and correctional officer positions, 53 and 36 respectively, may need to be defunded in the absence of a county sales tax, that isn't an attempt to manipulate policymakers into a position. Rather, it's the fulfillment of our obligation to inform you that operations, critical public safety operations, legal exposure, financial liability, lives and livelihood, all of these things will be impacted to varying degrees, leading potentially to catastrophic results if immediate action isn't taken to access a resource that the vast majority of other Wisconsin counties long ago tapped into, and that not one of those counties has chosen to repeal once they enacted it. Again, Racine County is one of only 3 counties without a county sales tax. We as a team, we've done our best to proactively identify the key questions that you may have, that your constituents may have. Tonight, however, it's our job to listen to you, to allow you to discuss these critical matters, answer your questions. Many of us are here either by video or in person to answer those questions. It's for you to identify additional areas that we need to address, that we need to supplement resources for you to address questions and concerns of your constituents. So that's really the extent of introductory remarks that I wanted to offer before turning it over to Finance Director Gwen Zimmer. Gwen has been asked to highlight just a few key budgetary points before we open the floor up to the discussion of the committee and other board members in attendance tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Lansdorf. I'm going to open it up to comments from our director, Gwen Zimmer.
Thank you. The first thing that I wanted to show is there's been a lot of materials that have been prepared, presented, and emailed out to the board, and we wanted to make it very easy for the board and for the public to be able to access the same materials. So our data and performance department created a website. If you can show the website, Byron. It is on the Racine County website under, I believe it's under government, racinecounty.com/our-county/sales tax ordinances. And then in here, we have the FAQ document, the presentation. If you can scroll down, Byron, or give me your mouse. It'll talk about the schedule of the meetings that are upcoming, including the listening sessions, which we're continuing to get scheduled. It's been a little bit hard to connect with all of the municipalities to get those scheduled. And then just today, we finalized an update to the FAQ document, which again is on this website. So I encourage you to look at it. We also included a feedback item. So if you could click on that, Byron. And we are directing folks to the county executive's office. So that would go to his email. And he is the central repository of all of those questions. And then he is passing it along to the appropriate staff or supervisors who would need to respond. And then the second thing, if I may, I would like to just show a few graphs that I've put together. I've spent the last week since the meeting pulling data and trying to create some data visuals. I printed it out. It should be in your booklet. It's also incorporated in the FAQ document now, but I wanted to give a little bit of context for this. This shows the general property tax levy, and just as a reminder, property tax is made up of two lines: debt service and operations. This is just operations and how it has changed since 2019. This can only change by net new construction. So on average, we're less than 2% growth every year, about $800,000 a year. On the next slide, I wanted to show the budgeted use of reserves that were included in each annual budget and approved by the county board. And you can see that since 2019, this has averaged, it's been between $6 to $11 million plus ARPA being used as a funding source to help balance the budget. On the next slide, this is the amount of reserves that are going back into reserves as we close the year. And you can see they're all negative, meaning we have not added back to reserves in the last 5 years. We have been running a net loss every year where our expenditures exceed the actual revenue coming in. So in the FAQ document, I say we need to use reserves to balance the budget, and then we're not replenishing those reserves. We're running a net loss every year. And then the last page, this took me the longest to do. This shows, in the PowerPoint presentation last week, we had a graph that shows the levy by category: criminal justice and public works and human services. This shows that same info, but over 5 years. So I don't want to interpret it for you, but I'd like to just point out that most departments are remaining flat, while the criminal justice has steadily increased over the last 5 years. So with that, Mr. Chairman, any questions, comments, discussion? We're happy to help.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Zimmer. I'm going to open it up to the committee here to ask questions of either Gwen or is Michael still on with us? Or the chairman, excuse me, or the county executive, Mr. Roanhouse. Any questions from the committee? Supervisor Wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Why is the sheriff's department spelled out and no other departments?
May I ask in what reference? In
Yeah,
the,
the big cuts that may have to transpire if this does not go through. Are there other departments that have been looked at to reduce the expenditures?
yes, in reference to the graph that I shared tonight, this is the amount of levy by area. And the sheriff's office is the largest amount of levy. So we took their percentage of levy, it's 70% of the total property tax levy. And if there is a $17 million deficit, which I can confirm there is, 70% of 17 million is $12 million. And so the sheriff himself extrapolated that to be 56 deputies and 36 correction
Okay,
officers.
and then I had called your office last week and unfortunately we didn't connect or you didn't call me back in regard to finding out the sheriff's department got an increase, pretty big increase in their budget. In belief that Foxconn was going to be coming in. So I'd like to get that information, if you have it at some point, to see what we did to expand the sheriff's department at that time. And obviously Foxconn never happened. The second thing is, I heard that the sheriff's department command staff, and I'm not sure if it's others that are using vehicles to take home. And I'd like to know if that is true.
Yes, that is true.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I did not get a message that you called. I apologize that weren't able to connect. I will work to get that information for you. I believe that was in the 2018 budget, 2019
right.
budget.
Yeah.
So I can
Before-
go back to I can go back to that document and provide that information to you.
So I kind of go back to my original question. I mean, you spelled out the sheriff's department with numbers, but we don't have numbers. I mean, you've got a percentage of what the departments are going to lose, but it's not spelled out as to how many people, who, or whatever.
In your pie graph, you did show what the impact would be to all of the different, right? And it's not in this packet here, but it was something you showed, right?
Yeah, I mean, what we did is we took all of these areas, administration, criminal justice, governmental, human services, and miscellaneous, and found out what the percentage of the levy is, and then multiplied that by 17 million. That, I mean, again, to Corporation Counsel's point, I am not the decision maker here. I've never, tried to be that. All I am here to do is provide information to you. If that were to be how the deficit was split, that would be one way of doing it. But I work at the pleasure of the county executive and of the board, whatever your preference is
And
for balancing the budget.
I get all that. That's well and good. And I'm not, we're seeing a dollar amount, but you spelled out in the sheriff's department how many specific sheriff's officers and how many correction officers, but it doesn't directly affect or tell us in human terms how are the other departments going to be affected. And maybe you're using that as an example, I guess, maybe is the way I would take it.
Yeah, if I may rebut that, the elected county sheriff gave that information to you. No appointed staff gave that information to you.
Additional questions from the committee? Supervisor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate all the additional information. I have two areas. My experience has been we always start with the deficit. In fact, County Executive Delagrave's address last year, he noted, this was October of last year, that we started with an initial deficit of 21 million. So previous county executives, and I have no doubt that County Executive Roanhouse would not be different, tried to share as much as possible. So is there quick summary, or would you be able to provide where the 17 million deficit is coming from projected for next year?
I'm not able to provide that yet. We are still too early in the process.
Okay, so it's the normal estimate.
Yeah, the FAQ document explains a little bit, and you know this, Vice Chairman Miller, what the budget process is. We
Right.
start it in May. We do payroll projections. We sit with the county executive, which we did with Jonathan, to set the health insurance rate and some of the other fringe rates that we control. But you don't get the WRS rate
Oh.
until the summer. You don't get the net new construction or the equalized value until August.
Yep.
So there are some things that are still up in the air. We were going off of a presumption of things that gets sent to the departments, and they're responsible for creating their budget requests and then sent back to our office. We combine everything together, and I just want to note there's 13,000 accounts out of the 25 plus departments. So it's a lot of work for us to do it. Byron finished that yesterday, and so we're still working through it. I plan on going through and making sure that I feel comfortable with the things that they've asked, and then we will give it to the county executive for the next round of it. And next week, the departments will defend their budget before the county executive and county board leadership.
If I may, yeah. In some ways, I feel that my questions are almost inappropriate, because in most counties, county executive doesn't even bring the county board in until the budget document is presented. So we're really fortunate in the history here of being very collaborative. But it's just, I was curious, but I understand that it is early. The other question I have, that would be directed to Michael, and that is, I'm always in favor of making it difficult to exceed goals or parameters. And in the sales tax ordinance, I think it indicates a 3/4 or 2/3 vote would be necessary to change the original intent. But is it not true that the county board by a majority vote could amend an ordinance? Did we lose him?
I can't answer that. Yes, it is a majority vote to update an ordinance, and upon feedback received, we chose to put in the language for the supermajority on there. But again, this is one version of an ordinance. We don't anticipate that we'll end up probably with this if this goes for final approval.
No, and I like the intent of the supermajority, but I think, here's my experience. I've watched since day one when a sales tax was allowed for the counties. And almost without exception, there's 1, 2, or 3 years of property tax relief, and then it goes right back to additional spending. So I don't want to be disingenuous to the public to think that, this is a miracle savings or reduction in property tax, because it's very easy to get around the original intent.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize. I was trying to interject earlier and it wasn't working again. Supervisor Miller, I caught just the last portion of your remarks. And one thing that I wanted to add that I think highlights that caution that you just expressed is in the recent litigation involving Brown County that made its way all the way up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court favored or decided in favor of Brown County and the practices of counties that had already implemented sales taxes. But on the question of property tax levy, even for those counties where they had specified exactly what this should go for and that it's for a dollar reduction, the WCA, they submitted a brief and conducted exhaustive research on that exact point. And in completing a review of the historic levies and the sales tax revenue of those counties that had enacted sales tax, they said that it demonstrated that as of 2021, not a single county had actually affected a true dollar for dollar reduction in their tax levy. And so you're absolutely right that Racine County in its current form, the sales tax ordinance, by articulating that 51% shall go towards a dollar for dollar offset to the property tax levy, it's important to qualify that there is opportunity if the circumstances required this, or if it was going to be catastrophic to not do so. There is opportunity to either repeal or to reallocate those revenues in any given year. But what we've done in the ordinance is we've required a supermajority vote, and that's something that's different from other ordinances that I've seen on that particular point. And so we heard from the public comment period at the last public hearing, there was a constituent who was taking the position that we needed to have this actually written by law, and that if it was ever going to be changed, that the board had to do that. That's exactly what we've done in the ordinance. There is a requirement that it has to be by further action of the Board of Supervisors to deviate from that 51% or to consider repealing or modifying any other portion of the sales tax ordinance. But we went a step further in requiring that it's not just a simple majority, but rather a super majority, a 2/3 member-elect vote. So just wanted to call that out specifically.
Yeah, and that's exactly what, when we lost you, that was the beginning of my point, that I'm very pleased that that supermajority is in the ordinance. But my question was, could not a future county board change the entire ordinance by a majority vote?
To repeal or to modify it would require a 2/3 member-elect vote, a supermajority. And that's different than other provisions in our ordinance. To modify other general provisions in our ordinance would require a simple majority member-elect. One exception that comes to mind is anything dealing with the sheriff's office and the Civil Service Commission. That by statute requires a supermajority vote. But in the absence of specific statutory language, it reverts back to that majority. That's why we've called that out and included that specific language that would require a 2/3 member-elect vote.
Thank you. I have one more, but I'll save it in case other people have questions.
Supervisor Kelly.
Thank you. I do have some questions on the sheriff's department, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to maybe pull this together and share with the board. How many positions are currently open for the sheriff's department?
We have the HR director, Sarah Street, is attending virtually. I'm not sure if she's able to speak or if she has that information. If not, we can pull it and get it for you.
Okay.
Sarah, are you with us?
While we're waiting for Sarah, and hopefully she can join, I don't have the specific data, Supervisor Kelly, in terms of specific positions. What I can share as we try and gather that information and make it available to the full board is that year to year, and the sheriff's office is no exception, perhaps they're the embodiment of this, is that within the deputies and also within the jail correctional officer positions, you're absolutely right that at any given time, it's not at all uncommon for there to be vacancies. What's changed in some recent years is that there were actual a set number of positions that were not funded. And so those positions were not eliminated. And so when we've heard some people in public comment periods questioning, well, the county hasn't actually made any sort of cuts because these positions still exist, what they're losing sight of is that there's a difference between cutting a position, eliminating it, and just not funding it for a period of time or for a given budget year. And if an example is the chief of staff position. This goes back about 6 or 7 budgets ago, where you'll still see the chief of staff for the county executive appear in the budget book, but it's not funded. And similarly, within the sheriff's office, deputies and correctional officers, there was a number of those positions that had not been funded in the last budget or perhaps the last two budgets. What we're finding now, though, and what I suspect Chief Deputy Widener would be able to share specifics on, is that what they're seeing today in terms of unfilled positions or vacancies is far exceeding as it relates to the deputies and as it relates to correctional officers, the number of positions that are funded. And so one could take the position, well, that means that we won't really see any sort of detriment in continuing to have a greater number of those positions unfunded. The counterpoint to that, and as corporation counsel and as the risk manager for the county, the position that I take is that's very concerning to have increasing numbers of deputy positions and correctional officer positions unfilled, particularly as you're seeing dwindling applicants, qualified applicants for some of these positions. And so I applaud the sheriff's office, the sheriff's team, in that they've been able to put together an exceptional team of deputies and correctional officers that helps in providing services, critical services to the community. It also helps in mitigating some of that risk and putting us in a better position to defend lawsuits that may come about. But the trends are concerning. And so amidst that trend, the notion of defunding further positions is only going to exacerbate, I'm afraid, the challenges that we're facing in getting qualified candidates to apply for and to remain in, if given the positions, to remain in those positions if we're looking at the prospect of cutting a much more significant number of those positions. And the other point that I was going to try and make earlier when Supervisor Wish was asking his question, and Gwen did a fantastic job of making the point that that's just representative of what that office constitutes on the current levy of 68%. And so if we were to make cuts based on what the current proportions are, one would follow that you'd be looking at that number of positions that we talked about. Of course, we don't budget that way. I mean, we don't budget just populating numbers into a computer and asking it to cut, to pump out what positions are going to be cut. It could be more. It also could be less. I mean, you could theoretically cut the entire Office of Corporation Counsel, facilities management, child support, many of which is funded through federal tax dollars, and you would see a drop in the bucket. You would still require double-digit cuts or unfunding of positions within the sheriff's office. So it's not intended to be manipulative at all, Supervisor Wish, and I apologize if it comes off that way. It's the best way of demonstrating visually what this could mean in terms of service cuts and positions being unfunded. But of course, it's only in going through with the county executive and the budgeting process that you get to pin down much more specifically. It's easier to represent those because there's no offsetting money coming from the state or from the federal government for those positions, different from HSD or from child support, for example.
Thank you, Attorney Lansdorf. Gwen, did we get Miss Sarah Street back on here to answer Supervisor Kelly?
So maybe just to clarify, maybe I asked it the wrong way. How many unfilled positions? And then my second question on that is how much overtime are we paying?
There are 3 unfunded positions currently that were unfunded in the 2024 budget. And then the overtime.
But how many unfilled, not unfunded? How many are not filled? How many open positions are not filled?
Okay, understood. 11 correction officers with 9 starting on September 3rd. And then 13 deputies and 5 offers are in the works. So they need to go through the hiring process and they expect them to start in October.
Okay, thank you.
And then over time, we can get that information. for you.
Okay, that'd be great. I have a question because I'm newer to the board, but back when we originally received the ARPA funds, was there some sort of staunch of raises that had happened?
Yeah, if you could, please.
Okay, so
You understand the
to-
question?
to clarify your question, were there increases to positions incorporated in the ARPA approvals?
And or raises used with the ARPA dollars. So instead of doing some municipalities, like when I worked at Summers, instead of doing things that were not long-term sustainable, we did stipends instead of raises.
Yes, this county board approved premium pay for essential workers, inclusive of dispatch technicians, correction officers, highway workers, and mental health, some mental health, not all mental health, and youth detention workers. And that was approved by resolution in, I think, August of 2021.
Okay, and then the last thing I have is if we could get a list, I asked probably a week ago, it wasn't from you. Someone had called me, a list of the non-mandated services and what that cost is. So we have a list of mandated services, but non-mandated services that we are doing. And there's a reason why I'm asking that. Obviously, I also serve on the city and, there's a lot of, I have to say this carefully, duplicated efforts, I guess, and I would like to see a lot more collaboration to where I think, either on either municipality, things could really be streamlined and it could save the taxpayers a lot of money.
Anything in addition, Supervisor Kelly? No, you're not at the moment. Supervisor Ekman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, could I just interject with one thing? And
Certainly.
maybe Gwen has all the direction that she needs, but the first thing that comes to mind, and I understand Supervisor Kelly exactly, especially with that context that you put it in, what you're looking for. A challenge, though, that I would see is there are a host of positions. Facility is an example. That is not a mandated service, but in order for you to fulfill mandated services, you need lights on. You need the buildings functioning properly, and so it's difficult. It's not as convenient to just simply put positions in a bucket of is it mandated or is it unmandated. Corporation Counsel. This is a position that is created by statute. It's not required, though. You could theoretically cut the entire office of Corporation Counsel and refuse to pay for outside counsel. That would be detrimental to a county, but it's not necessarily a mandated service. And so that's just one of the challenges that I wanted to highlight. I think we can try and put together that data that gets to the core of your question, but it's not always as simple as just is something mandated or non-mandated.
I'm gonna be a little more specific than Health and Human Services, non-mandated services.
Supervisor Ekman.
Thank you. So I promise I got a question coming, but I was summoned before the Village of Sturtevant Board last week, and so went and spoke with the board. Gerald was there, so he can keep me honest. But of course, they shared some of the concerns that we've all heard about. The timing of an increase in taxes, and one of the maybe one of the resounding questions was, what's in it for a village resident? And as in my discussion with that board, I go back to the question of how much service should the county be providing? And as we know, the Racine County's been run by conservatives for decades, and now sure, there's always room. You can always say there's room to tighten the belt. There's always some room to cut here and there, but I personally feel like our county is well and efficiently run. And I don't think there's a lot of fat to go after. So it comes back to the question to me as to how much service should the county be providing, and what's also a deal breaker for me is the use of fund balance, that we are in a healthy position. And we have a fund balance that is appropriate for a county of our size, and to systematically be using that is not prudent. And I'd rather make the tough decisions now, whichever side of the equation they're on, and continue to maintain that rainy day fund that is necessary to weather the storms that might be, coming in the future. And then, the question that around the sales tax is, if we agree on what services the county should provide, then who should be paying for it? We get shared revenue from the state, and the rest of the levy is, it's property tax. So on to the question, Gwen, if you can help me walk through the math. So if we use 60 million as a levy, and with the current proposed ordinance that has a 51% property tax relief, we'll call it 50 just to make the math easier. If we were to also assume 20 million as a sales tax revenue, so we'd be talking about $10 million of property tax relief. So, and let's just say the first year after we've collected that 20 million, we would see the levy go from 60 to 50. Am I?
Yes.
Okay. And then the net, so then we go in with a $50 million, and then the next year, we're going to see we have the ability to increase the levy by the net new construction. So maybe does it start at 50 or does it start at 60?
So again, this is under the invite, and I asked actually our financial advisors to stay in case there's specific questions about this. The levy is made up of, it's 51 million for 51 million for operations and 9 to 10 million for debt service. We would cover debt service. That would be my recommendation, and I think the recommendation of the financial advisors with the property tax relief. So that would keep the operations tax levy whole. You're not taking from there, so that you could grab new growth in future years. So yes, you would start at the 51.
So, and we would, like we normally see something like 800,000 in net new, or increase in levy due to net new construction. So we'd go from 50 to 51,
Yep.
But then that year we would also collect 20 million, use half of it, but that half goes from 60 back down to, or 61 down to 51.
Yep.
So we would kind of expect it to, to reset down to, we get the 10 million of, we would see it right away in our tax bill, a big decrease. We wouldn't expect to see a big decrease after that.
Right, it would remain flat if the ordinance passes the way that it is
Okay.
and is not amended, to Supervisor Miller's point.
And that was kind of what I was, as the ordinance, to answer the question of the village board, what's in it for the residents of the village, as the ordinance is currently presented, it would be not a 50% reduction in individuals, but more like what's 10 on 60. What's 10? I can't do. What's that ratio?
You said 10 on 60?
Yeah. Like,
10 on
but
60.
Okay. So on a $750 average property tax bill, you'd see like $150.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to actually give numbers. It is
Yeah, I
important
understand.
in the FAQ because the ordinance proposes that this would start in 2026. We don't know the equalized value or the net new construction for that year yet. But if you were to apply that to this year, it would be about $175.
Okay, so that's,
Or, yeah, if you use the numbers for this year with the $10 million, it would be between 150 and 200. It's like 175.
so to answer Gerald's question, that we would, we collected 20 million. And for that individual property owner, we would use $175 to fund county government, actually more specifically to pay for debt service. And the other 175 we would give back to the resident. Thank you.
Supervisor Wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nobody's really come out and said it other than, in a roundabout way. Property tax relief, if this proposal goes through, the consumer or constituents won't see that until 2026, right?
It would be on the tax bill that they receive. Jeff, do you know, would it be in December of 26?
2025 property tax bill would be distributed December.
Okay, so December of 26 on that tax bill, that's where they would receive that
So in
credit.
2026.
Yes.
So I think it's important that gets out officially that way, rather than saying, we're gonna give, you're gonna be getting property tax relief. It doesn't really say, spell out when it is. So it would be, I think, wise to put that in writing or in print. Secondly, the city of Racine had a shortage in police officers. And this was a year ago, 2 years ago, fairly recent, where our sheriff's department, the county, was supplementing the Racine Police Department. And I had asked the former county executive approximately how much that was costing us and give me a ballpark number. I'm assuming we're still providing those services. And I think it would be prudent maybe for the city of Racine maybe to kick in to cut some of the expenditures down for the sheriff's department. And I don't know if that's been brought up to the city. I know they're pulling Mount Pleasant, Caledonia, and I'm not even sure who else are answering calls in the city of Racine. So they need to step up to the plate, in my opinion.
Supervisor Kelly. Excuse me.
Thank you for remembering my name.
Yeah.
That's actually a pet project of mine, so I'm glad you brought that up. I have addressed that a couple different times with the sheriff's office just because, and yes, they're still at a very low number. I want to say it's in the 160s. So it's unfortunate, but I get that they're mandated by the state to provide that service, but we've requested some reports. But I don't know that would be probably more up to the sheriff to decide whether or not he's going to be billing the city. But I definitely advocated for that multiple times, and I continue to do that because there's some area where in that gray area, the city is taking advantage of our services. And so it's costing our budget. And unfortunately, I'm toggling between both municipality hats. But, in all fairness, I have to also look out for the county. So I think that should be addressed at some time, even though it's a sensitive political topic.
Supervisor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would like to hear again how this would roll out specifically for fiscal year or next year's budget, 2025. There's really no property tax relief. It's all the sales tax will go to either operations or debt.
Corporation Counsel, would you like to speak about what's in the ordinance?
Well, yeah, to clarify, the 51%, which is the direct dollar for dollar offset to the property tax levy, that begins in the year 2026. For 2025, we're in the process, and Director Zimmer has indicated this on numerous times, we're in the process of finalizing the proposed budget. And so how a set number of dollars, which wouldn't be a full year of sales tax revenue, it would just be 3/4 of a year, omitting the first quarter, how that would be allocated is still under some level of deliberation. There is debt that's, that I know that there's discussion that it may not be that direct dollar for dollar offset that wouldn't be triggered until 2026. But there is still an effort to ensure that this isn't, spent entirely on operations. That's not the intention here at all. But there are some significant needs that need to be addressed, along with prudent cuts and other belt tightening measures. But we can't speak to the specifics of that until we finalize that proposed budget. But we are working tirelessly to get that out sooner than we historically have, and to embark on those discussions that Supervisor Miller, you mentioned earlier, and collaboratively with from the county board.
Just to follow up then, my concern is that it appears that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that in 2025, it would be one-time money, and then are we creating or just delaying a crisis when in 2026, much of the sales tax is going to go to property tax relief, so we're just going to have to make $10 million cuts in the 2026 budget?
That's absolutely a valid concern, and something that we've discussed extensively as we're working to craft that budget. And if that is omitted in the budget when it's presented, I would expect a healthy dose of scrutiny for exactly those reasons that you just emphasized, Supervisor Miller, of trying to avoid a future cliff. But there's also simultaneously, that measure that we called out earlier, where we need to walk that line of not creating future cliffs, but we also, I would countenance in favor of, allowing for some degree of flexibility based on unforeseen challenges that may come in the future. But again, counterbalancing that with the supermajority, so that it's not just a simple majority of people who recognize how imperative it is to potentially deviate, but rather it's that supermajority of the board. So excellent points, Supervisor Miller. They're points that are made extensively as we're working to finalize that budget. And I would expect to see, a best faith effort to try and walk that fine line, that balance that I just described of not setting ourselves up, the county, in future years for a future cliff, but also being mindful that there may be unanticipated developments that may necessitate that, and that we've built in appropriate measures to respond as needed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Miller. Thank you, Attorney Lansdorf. Any additional questions from the committee here this evening?
One last one.
Supervisor Wish.
Thank you. We're talking about dollars and cents and how it affects the consumer or public or our constituents, or however you want to word it. I think it's important to mention out loud too that timing on this really stinks. And I'm talking in a United States, not global, and maybe global issue, because you've got inflation that, some people say is going away, but it's not. Gas prices are 3 times what they were in 2019. Your price of food is going up, and there's a lot of anxiety probably out there right now about the November elections and what direction the government's going to take. They're talking about our deficit, which, they're saying in 20 years the country's going to be bankrupt if we can continue along the path that we're on right now. All that needs to change. I mean, some of these counties, when they implemented their county taxes, the economy was probably a lot better than it is now. People's income, their take home, was probably a lot better than it is now. Every dollar counts. So I think it's, I'm voicing it because I've been thinking about this a lot. I've also talked to a lot of people, and I won't go into what I'm finding out yet. But I don't know, I got real, concerns and, I don't know if this is the answer to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Wish.
Go ahead,
Supervisor
Attorney
Wish, just
Lancer.
one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. There's no easy, clean way of me injecting. But one piece of data that may be helpful, and first, just the general observation, there's never a good time, a favorable time to talk sales tax. I doubt that any of the 69 counties that have gone down the path and have gotten the necessary approvals to implement their sales tax did so with great fanfare and the public cheering them on for doing so. The data, though, that I can share is that since the year 2000, there have been, it's between 17 and 19 counties that have implemented the sales tax since 2000. That means that, again, more than the majority of the 72 counties, more than the majority implemented sales tax prior to the year 2000. And so draw any conclusion from that you may. It's been on a rolling basis, but there's never a good best time to pursue something like this. Unfortunately, it often comes from a place of need. And sadly, I think that's where we're at right now. But better being in a place of need than from a place of true crisis. And that's why we're trying to why the county executive is proposing this now, why former county executive Delgrave had every intention of rolling this out in 2024 as well.
Thank you. Supervisor Spencer.
Thank you. A couple of comments on a couple of other questions. The question that Supervisor Kelly asked, I'm curious how many of our municipalities cover the cost that the Racine Sheriff's Department office covers? Supplements.
Yeah, we do have professional contracts with a number of them. I can pull up the list of it, but they contract with us to provide a certain amount of deputy hours. And the total amount of those contracts, they're only paying for the deputy's salary. There's no fluff in it. It's our actual true cost is, I think, 1.2 million out of the entire, 30 million dollar budget that they have. I think that there's approximately 6 to 8 municipalities, but we can get you copies of those for your record.
I remember one came up not too long ago. There was some discussion about that contract. Waterford?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
assisting with Waterford right now. The town of Waterford has a police presence, but the village, and they provide it to the village, and they put their staff on administrative leave, and so the sheriff had to
That
walk in,
sounds
and we
right,
did an
yes.
emergency contract with them.
Yes, okay. Thank you. That is a question that I had from a constituent this morning, so I would like to find that out. Another, another county comparison I'd like to know is with the court delays. I know that the DA isn't on the call, but with all the court delays, how are the counties that already have a sales tax in place compared with the Racine County delays in cases? Thank you. And I guess my third thing is the most people that I'm hearing from are renters. And they feel that this is very inequitable because we're giving back to the property tax owners when the renters are facing higher, increasing rent and higher food costs and all the things that Supervisor Wish mentioned. And, back to school, that now we're going to, like next year would be, you're adding the additional 0.5% tax on clothing and school supplies and all those things. So it's a very resistant group of people that are, not feeling that they're being looked at equitably. So I want to put that on the table because that's the biggest thing that I'm hearing from.
Supervisor Spencer, if I could just address two parts of that, and those are important policy questions that the board needs to address, of striking, what that appropriate balance is with direct property tax relief, and also addressing some of the concerns that you've raised. What I did want to highlight, though, and this is all information that you'll find in the frequently asked questions, is that there are a number of essential items that are exempt from the county sales tax. That includes prescription drugs, medical equipment, insurance, food and food ingredients, manufactured homes, motor vehicle and alternative fuel, electricity and natural gas. That's during a specific time period. That's November to April. And then also water utilities. And then the second point that I'd make is, just as you talked about some of these seasonal concerns, just as kids are getting ready for another school year and are looking at purchasing school supplies and getting ready for school, is that if authorized as part of this year's or next year's annual budget, this would not take effect until January of 2025. And so for the remainder of 2024, and as families are putting together their school supplies for the 2024-2025 school year, that they would not see an impact insofar as that they're doing their shopping exclusively in Racine County.
Thank you. I understand that, and I think they do too. They do know the exemptions of, it's conversations that we're having, but it is future concerns. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, excuse me. Wait, excuse me. Youth and governance. Any questions, any issues, any, understanding, things need explanations? Should you have any, please direct them to myself or our director, please. Thank you. Supervisor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It might be helpful to have this on the agenda in future meetings as we continue to.
We'll take that into consideration, sir.
This.
Thank you very much. Okay, I would like to move on next. Thank you all, thank you all for participating. Thank you, Attorney Lansdorf. Thank you for the committee. And thank you to the general public for making their comments earlier this evening. I am going to move on to number 7 on my list. I need my glasses to read it better. Jeff Lattis, our county treasurer, to authorize the county treasurer to vacate the order of judgment of an in-rem property located at 4241, how do we pronounce that? Goalies Lane. This is required for action first and second reading at our county board meeting on August 27th. Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in April of this year, the court awarded Racine County judgment to 67 parcels through interim foreclosure. Up until this point, the committee and subsequent county board has opted to or agreed to vacate judgment on 11 of those parcels. We have one more parcel that we're presenting where we're seeking authorization to have Corporation Counsel petition the court to have another judgment vacated. Previous owner of the property has paid all of the delinquent property taxes plus any associated fees, and we are requesting that we be authorized to petition the court to have that judgment vacated and the property returned to the previous owner. To help expedite that process, respectfully request that we have a first and second reading at the next county board meeting if this were to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Lattis. We have a first and we have a second. Do we have any discussion, or do we have some discussion on this? Thank you very much for getting this accomplished. I don't have it approved yet, but thank you for getting to the point of the individual working with the county to pay back their back taxes and bring the property current. You know, we're not realtors, okay? But I am, but that we are not realtors. So thank you very much. I have a first and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Youth and Governance, all in favor? Committee, all in favor? Are there any nays? Hearing none. This will go to the County Board August 27th for first and second reading. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Number 8 on my agenda is transfers. The Youth Human Service Department. I know we have Yelena Jones here to authorize an acceptance of a Wisconsin Department of Health Services grant in the amount of $200,000 and transfer those funds within the service department. This is action required for first reading on the county board, August 27th, 2024. Welcome, Yelena.
Hello, thank
Good
you.
to see you again.
So Department of Health Services put out a grant funding opportunity for a 988 improvement project. As we know, that's the National Suicide Hotline. The grant opportunity is to improve the county level of crisis services provided to those individuals contacting the 988 line. We are already certified under Chapter 34 to provide crisis services in Racine County. The grant opportunity was for $1 million. There was 5 candidates that were selected, Racine County being one of them, for $200,000. With this being said, the ask is to move forward with first reading at the next county board meeting. We would not need to add any additional staff. This would go under the current staff that we already have. We have the capacity to increase the services being provided, and ultimately it would provide expanded crisis services to the individuals that we may not be reaching in Racine County that are utilizing the 988 line instead.
Would move to approve first reading August 27th.
We have a first and a second from Supervisor Wish. Discussion. Question, Madura. Madura, turn on your mic, please.
What are specifically the services that you're planning on improving?
So with the services that Racine County Crisis already provides, if someone contacts the crisis hotline, I'm sorry, I have a double ear infection. Don't judge me. I'm on antibiotics, but tell me if you can't hear me well. So basically, we provide outreach services if we're contacted by anybody in the community, law enforcement, any type of community partner. We go ahead and provide mobile crisis services, meaning we show up to wherever they're at in the community, complete a mental health assessment, identify what the appropriate need and plan of action is from there with that consumer. If it's, them going into the hospital, possibly utilizing our crisis hostel sale program, or just connecting with us, with resources on an outpatient level. So we continue, we will do the same thing for 988. We're basically creating a mechanism within our current electronic health record to be able to pull the 988 referrals received. And once we receive those, we will provide feedback back to 988 of how many referrals we're actually receiving from them, how many we respond to, how many provide, do not require like imminent intervention. Yet again, we still provide follow-up services, maybe next day, voluntary services, engaging them, et cetera. So the whole goal is to make sure that everybody is receiving the mental health services that they're seeking in the community.
Supervisor Spencer.
I just have a quick ask that you kind of briefly describe what SAIL is so they understand.
So SAIL is actually our stabilization assessment intervention linkage program. What we're able to do, it's a 15-bed crisis hostel. Individuals are able to admit there just for crisis stabilization. They can choose to stay the night if they wish. While they're there, the goal is for them to stabilize on medication, connect to providers, other resources in the community, and really utilize us in those times of crisis.
Additional discussion from the committee. We do have a first and we have a second. Excuse me, County Executive, excuse me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Jason, answering your question to what villages get from counties, case in point.
Good point. Very good point. Okay, Youth and Governance, all in favor? Committee, all in favor? Are there any nays? Hearing none, this will go to the county board August 27th for first reading. I believe you're up again, Yelena, in regards to authorize the acceptance of Wisconsin Department of Children and Family Services grant in the amount of $80,625.84 and transfer the funds within the human service to budget. Request first reading at the August 27th, 2024 county board meeting.
This grant opportunity is actually through the Department of Children and Families, additional funding that they initially anticipated to come through ARPA were not spent, so they put out for a grant funding opportunity to the counties. The Youth and Family Division applied for these funds and were awarded the $80,625.84. This would go to support families remaining in the home and together, whatever that includes doing, and trying to provide, those wraparound services the Department of Children, Families, and Youth and Family Division already provide. So we're asking that this moves to the next county board reading as well.
Would move to approve first reading August 27th. I have a first and a second discussion. Supervisor Miller.
I should have said that one of the reasons we are known statewide, nationally, for being effective and efficient is so many of our departments, but especially Human Services, goes after these special funding opportunities. So I believe the whole county board is very grateful.
Yeah, hats off for knowing there's the grants, writing the grants, getting the grants accepted, and then bringing them in front of the committee. Hats off. Excellent.
And then complying with the grants and reporting on the grants.
Complying and reporting, yeah, all the back end stuff. Great. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, I have a first and a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. Youth and Governance, all in favor? Committee, all in favor? Are there any nays? Hearing no nays, this will go to the county board for first reading on August 27th, 2024. Thank you, Yelena. Next up, we have Public Works and Development Services, Riley Bain, authorizing the Racine County Public Works to enter into a memorandum of understanding between Racine County Public Works, the Village of Union Grove High School for the installation of a rectangular rapid flash beacon crossing dam. This is for action on first and second reading at our county board meeting on August 27th, 2024. Hello, Raleigh and Vice Chairman Meyer.
How's it going? Yeah, this is something that I've been working with Supervisor Meyer for quite some time now. And he brought it to our attention over at Public Works that this is an intersection over by the Union Grove School on Highway 45, that there have been a number of pedestrian and vehicle interactions. And one of the ways to solve it was to put this the rectangular rapid flash beacon out there. And basically what this is this is going to be run off solar panels, and it's going to be a push button. And when a pedestrian or a student decides that they want to cross or need to cross to get from the school or to the school, they can push the button, it's going to flash, and cars are mandated to stop at the intersection to let the pedestrian cross. This is one of the things where it's a high cost item at $21,552.28. And he was asking the county for some assistance. Now, granted, it's not our road, it's not our school, but they are our residents. So this is one of the things I wanted to help assist them with it. And the county's cost at a three-way cost. Our county cost is going to be $7,184.09 from the county, $7,184.09 from the high school, and from the village, $7,184.10 from the village. So they got that big price tag of an extra penny on there. And Supervisor Myers here, if you want to talk a little bit more about it and how we came to this.
Sure. Thank you. This kind of goes back to the latest incident that happened on November 28th of 2023. A young student was hit by an F-250 crossing the road at 2:53 in the afternoon. And that was one of the last ones where it was a pedestrian versus vehicle accident. Just a little bit of brief history. In the last 5 years, there's been 210 accidents with property damage and 36 accidents involving personal injury. So, and this includes the whole length of the high school from the top of the hill by the FFA building all the way down to 7th Street intersection. There is a beacon there on 7th Street intersection right now in 45, but it's old, it's antiquated, it flashes very slowly. The new beacon system that we have at the top of the hill by the high school that they put in when they did the road project and Canopy Hills subdivision is the same type of system that we're proposing to put in down on 7th and 45 as well. It actuates better, it draws more attention. And I've also been in contact with the village of Union Grove and the high school trying to work on lighting situations too for that intersection too, because there is just one street light over on that street that's what's on the fire department side. So it's something that we're kind of working on. And I just thank Director Beam for getting me in contact with the people from the DOT. They came down with 4 people from the DOT. We created a meeting with the high school, the village president, myself, and trying to collaborate together to work on an effort to get some pedestrian safety for all of our residents.
Thank you, Vice Chair. My comment on this is I love the collaboration between the 3 parties. It's wonderful. And the number one objective is safety. Okay. The only question I have is the $7,184.09 is being taken from where? Highway safety? You may have provided it, but I'm sorry, I missed it.
Correct. Go ahead, Gwen.
On the fiscal note, there is a highway safety improvement account that is levy funded for use on highway roads. It's not a state one. It's for our roads. There's about $35,000 in there remaining.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Wish?
Thank you. Quite familiar with Union Grove High School, 8 years too late. I have 3 daughters who went there, all graduate. Is this by the fire station? So it's directly across the street from the parking lot.
Right.
Okay, I'm all in favor. Absolutely needed. Should have had it a long time ago. Thank you.
Are you moving? Okay.
I will so move. Second reading.
Thank you. I thought are you seconding it then?
Sure.
You're third, seconding it, third. Great. We have a first and we have a second. Supervisor Heckman?
Oh, sorry. Okay. And what's the reason for first and second?
We're trying to get it in before school starts.
Okay,
Most.
gotcha. I'm in.
Supervisor Kelly?
Thank you. Being the treasurer of Union Grove, I hear about this all the time. It's very much needed. I will be abstaining from this vote tonight, but I'm definitely in favor of this. I hear about it all the time, so glad it's getting done.
Questions, comments? Supervisor Wish? Okay, we have a first and a second for, we have a first and a second motion for first and second reading, August 27th, 2024.
Mr. Chairman, just for protocols, Supervisor Kelly should probably leave the room while we vote.
Thank you. Yeah, that would just stand outside the door. No.
Minutes should so reflect.
Yeah, she's got it. Youth and governance, all in favor. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Next up, I have the Finance Department, Gwen Zimmer. I know Gwen provided us all with preliminary budget information, and I'm just opening it up for any specific discussion on what was handed out. That was a long spreadsheet with all the numbers on it, year-to-date budget to actual by fund and department. I'm going to open this up for discussion, and this is just for information only. Should Gwen not have any answers, I'm sure she'll get them to you as soon as possible. So I'm opening it up for discussion. Any questions you may have?
And again, this is the spreadsheet it was. Mr. Chairman, just to help us understand, I think I understand most of it, but could you just go pick a line item and go through what it means, or maybe Byron?
Sure, we can just look at finance since work in finance. So if we go to page, so 10-4. So if you'll notice the first line of finance, there's an R by there and -203. So that's the original budget column. So we budgeted $203,000 in revenues. And below that is E, which means that's expense row. And we budgeted $1,472 approximately in expenses. So you can follow that all the way across. The next column is revised budget. Revised budget would include any carry forwards from non-lapsing accounts. Next to that is actuals as of 8/19. That's when we ran the report. So that's the year-to-date actual expenses that hit that account, okay? And then any encumbrances would be next door. So if there's any open purchase orders, that's where those would show up. And those are treated kind of like an expense against what's available. And the available budget is exactly that, what's available for the remainder of the year. You'll notice that for the revenue line for finance, there's a negative available. That just means that revenue hasn't come in yet based on what we budgeted, because that particular revenue comes in at the end of the year. So that's why that still looks like a negative available balance. Below that, what's available is just the difference between what was budgeted and plus any carry forwards we had from those non-lapsing accounts, less the actuals that came in for expenses. And so that's where that 443 comes in. So so I hope that helps a little bit. Next to that's the percentage remaining. You know, that's well, excuse me, right underneath that, it's the net of the revenue and expenses for the finance department total. You can follow that over all the way to the right, and there's a percentage remaining balance there, which again could be a little bit skewed depending on how many revenues we're still expecting to come in to that, you know, department for the year. Does that help?
Questions? You guys are looking up at the screen. What's up there? Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Any more? Well, thank you for preparing this. I appreciate it. And I think this is something that we'd like to see on a monthly basis. Okay. I know I would. So I'm requesting it.
It's not a problem.
Thank you. Okay, where am I on my list here? Okay, communications and report referrals from the county board. Move to receive and file. Do I have a second? Okay, I have a first and a second. Youth and governance, all in favor? Committee, all in favor? Aye. Are there any nays? Hearing none. We will receive and file this. Next up, I have the staff report. Finance and Human Resource Committee meeting, next meeting is September 4th. I'd like to call on Sarah Street. I believe she's still on.
Yes,
Sarah, are
can you
with
hear
us?
me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you
Oh,
for
good,
joining us.
wonderful. Yeah, I'm sorry that you couldn't hear me earlier. So I just wanted to announce that we're going to be rolling out an employee satisfaction survey. It's going to kick off August 27th, and then it'll be due September 10th. We're hoping to encourage employees to participate, and we'll be offering 8 hours of paid PTO that will be randomly selected for those that do participate. And along with that, we have a new feature that we're able to not only communicate with our employees through email, but now we can communicate with through text messages. So we'll be rolling that out, and tomorrow will be the first text message. Just want you all to be aware, I'm assuming that you will be getting them as well, that it is legit. It's not a scam. The first one is going to say, save this number in your contacts as Racine County HR, and we'll be occasionally sending important updates to staff. So then in September, before the employee survey is due, we're going to text all employees, reminding them to participate in the survey. And then we'll also be using the text feature for things like open enrollment, other benefit changes, policy changes, if there's building closures, and any other important updates. It's just another way that we can communicate with our employees. That's it for me.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Hearing none, I need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
We are adjourned at 6:46. Thank you.